Hello. In this episode of the House of Lechmere, I'm going to evaluate the most popular Jack the Ripper film on YouTube, which is called The Grisly Murders of Jack the Ripper. So far, it's had over 22 million views, so it has hugely more reach than this humble channel and must have some influence over how the general, vaguely interested public understand the case. So I'm going to see how accurate it is. I was actually put onto this film by one of my viewers as I'd never heard of it before. It's produced by a channel called the BuzzFeed Unsolved Network, which describes itself as a one-stop destination for all things mystery, true crime, conspiracy, supernatural, and everything in between. BuzzFeed is connected to the Huffington Post and so is actually part of a big internet corporation. This segment of it, the BuzzFeed Unsolved Network, has nearly 2.5 million subscribers, and its films have had over 2 billion views. Their Jack the Ripper film is their 9th most popular out of probably hundreds that they've made. They're very prolific. Their most popular film, incidentally, has had 39 million views, and it's called 3 Horrifying Cases of Ghosts and Demons. That might give you a taste of their general output. So they're highly successful and must generate a lot of revenue on YouTube. Probably some of you have heard of them, but I must live in a bubble, as I hadn't. Before I dive into this particular film, I searched YouTube under Jack the Ripper as my search term and found that actually there's one other Jack the Ripper related film with even more views, an incredible 63 million at the moment. It's called Jack the Ripper versus Hannibal Lecter, Epic Rap Battles of History. A rap battle, for those who don't know, I do, as I'm down with the kids, is where 2 rappers, rap being a particular genre of popular music, contest their skills as wordsmiths in a song. I'll play a short extract from this film so you can see what it's about. I hope I'm allowed by YouTube to do this.
Boy, mate, House of Lechmere, it's Jack the Ripper, Jack the Rapper, following you way before the dawn of Twitter. I'm a human trigger warning through the night until the morning. When the light shines upon my crimes, you find it sick, appalling, an infamous, notorious delinquent. There's little more gory a thing than living in Victorian England.
That's more than enough. I thought it was quite amusing. I'll put a link to the film below in case anyone wants to watch or listen to it, but back to the film, which I'm going to properly critique. The BuzzFeed Unsolved Network is fronted by 2 young, engaging presenters who joke around a lot, but they try to make serious points in a humorous manner, as you'll see.
This week on BuzzFeed Unsolved, in our season premiere, we investigate Jack the Ripper, perhaps the most infamous serial killer of all time. Hundreds of suspects have been named for this case, and it has baffled investigators and Ripperologists alike for over 100 years.
But it's not gonna baffle the boys.
I guess to attract a young audience, you have to be fun. And you know what? I've nothing against this, as it'll bring a new audience into the field. In the analytics for my channel, for this channel, only 1% of my audience, or actually less than that, is under 24 years of age. And that tells its own story, doesn't it? Anyway, let's get right into this film.
The culprit, a madman with no clear motive, the world's most notorious serial killer, Jack the Ripper.
Stating as a fact that the culprit was a madman is not the best start, as we can't really comment on his mental condition, seeing as how we don't know who he was. I have an idea who I think he was. The giveaway's in the name for this channel, and he wouldn't be described as a madman. The killer was almost certainly a psychopath. Psychopaths are not mentally normal, but in the legal sense, they're not judged as being mad. Anyway, I may be being a bit pernickety, but it sets the wrong tone to suggest the killer was mad.
In the end, the public was so upset at the failed attempts to identify the killer that the police commissioner and Home Secretary eventually resigned.
The Home Secretary, Henry Matthews, did not resign. He was conservative and left office in August 1892, nearly 4 years after the canonical murders, following a general election that resulted in a new minority Liberal government, so he left office due to there being a change of government. He certainly wasn't forced to resign.
Also, touching on the police commissioner, I think this is the first time I've actually seen a police commissioner resign because he was so upset. And that makes sense to me because I've said this before, when there's a serial killer on the loose, you really are just playing cat and mouse with the killer.
Yeah.
And he's just getting outfoxed by him at every corner.
It's your whole livelihood.
That could drive you insane. I feel like that would drive me insane.
Sir Charles Warren, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, didn't resign because he was upset. He was forced out, effectively by Matthews, the guy I just mentioned, after he'd written an article in what was called Murray's magazine, justifying his work as Commissioner, and he hadn't obtained ministerial approval to do this beforehand. He was reprimanded for this and told not to do it again, and he resigned in protest. Warren had come under intense public criticism, particularly as he had authorised that some graffiti that was found in Goulston Street in Whitechapel or Spitalfields, which might have been written by the killer, be washed off the wall before it could be photographed. I covered this in a previous film, and I'll link to it in the description below.
We're going to cover the 5 canonical victims, and by the end, we'll have examined the most suspects we've ever presented with 8 possible killers.
Okay, so they're sticking to the 5 so-called canonical murders, and we'll examine 8 suspects. We'll see who those 8 are when we get there. This film came out in 2018, so it's fairly recent, and should hopefully reflect a list of modern, more credible suspects, or at least not waste words on some of the old school ludicrous suspects. But we'll see.
Right now we're at the site of the first murder. This is Mary Ann Nichols. They found her at the western end of Bucks Row, which is now Durward Street. You can kind of see where it was, like, see that building right there with the white windows?
Yeah.
We can't go over there because there's construction now.
It's a growing city.
But just below that and a little bit towards us, she was found in the gateway of one of the houses that lined this street before.
This isn't a criticism, but it's interesting that because of the Crossrail building works which were taking place, they couldn't approach the Polly Nichols crime scene. These works went on for quite a few years and started before the excellent documentary, The Missing Evidence Jack the Ripper, which was based around the suspect Charles Lechmere. That was made in 2014, and they were going on before that. Believe it or not, some of the more unreasoning Lechmere theory opponents, and there are quite a few, believe me, accused the Missing Evidence filmmakers of being dishonest in some way for not being able to recreate accurately what happened around the murder of Polly Nichols, even though they were told this was because some areas were closed off due to the Crossrail building works, which happened in this film as well. That's the wacky world of Ripperology for you. These building works only finished a few years ago, and I did a couple of films about the changes to Whitechapel Underground Station, which was what it was all about, and how they alter our appreciation of this crime scene, and I'll put links again to these short couple of films below.
Right now we're walking up on the site of the second murder, Elizabeth Stride. She was found by a man right around here. This is now, I think, a schoolyard.
That's the wrong schoolyard gate. There's 2. The actual one is about 20 yards further on, but I'm being a bit picky there, aren't I?
But what's weird is that after he killed Catherine Eddowes here, he went back towards the direction of the first murder.
This guy knows how to zag.
Either that or he just knew the police routes.
I think he's just a zagger.
This is a reference to the dropping of a piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron underneath that graffiti in Goulston Street that I mentioned earlier. But this wasn't really back in the direction of Liz Stride's murder, as will be seen in the following map that they reproduce.
A sign of the anti-Semitism that was common in the area. However, the crucial detail of this clue is the fact that it was found east of the Eddowes murder site, in the direction of Elizabeth Stride's murder site, the murder that occurred just 45 minutes prior. This perplexing decision could mean that the killer willingly entered an area that was swarming with cops. Aside from demonstrating the killer's evasive abilities, this could suggest the killer lived in this East London area, as it possibly explains the motive for entering a dangerous situation.
From that map, I don't think it can really be claimed that the Apron was dropped in the direction of the Liz Stride murder, and far from the streets being swarming with police after that murder, the local beat policeman PC Long was unaware that it had even taken place. Although it is a sensible observation that with the killer heading east from Mitre Square, it very strongly suggests that he lived in the east.
And it was delivered in a box with half a human kidney. The kidney at the time was believed to be Catherine Eddowes' missing kidney. However, it was found to be a prank by a medical student.
Wait, so the From Hell letter was a medical student? That's disappointing.
I suppose, yeah.
Because I love From Hell. Just that as a sign-off. From Hell.
This kind of also demonstrates the climate surrounding this.
Right.
The half kidney wasn't found to be a prank by a medical student. The provenance of the kidney, whether it belonged to Catherine Eddowes or not, remains a mystery.
This murder was by far the most gruesome, as her body was disemboweled and, quote, virtually skinned down, end quote.
This relates to the murder of Mary Kelly. Virtually skinned down isn't a quote from the period. They seem to be quoting from a website run by Jack the Ripper tour guide called Richard Jones, and others seem to have copied it from there. But then we come to the suspects. As they said at the outset, they're going to be looking at 8, so let's go and see who they are.
The first suspect was Montague Johnson Druit. Druit was a barrister who may have had an uncle and cousin who were doctors. Around the time of his death, Druit may have been around the age of 40 and supposedly had an interest in surgery. Montague possibly lived with his cousin, who was practicing medicine close to where the Whitechapel murders occurred.
There are many errors here. His name was Montague John Druit, not Johnson, and his father was the doctor. He was actually 31 years old, although in one version of a police document called the McNaughton Memorandum, Druit's age is incorrectly given as about 41. He had no known interest in surgery. He didn't live with his cousin. He was a teacher and lived in rooms near his school, which was in Blackheath, which was several miles away from where the murders took place.
After the final murder, Montague disappeared, only to be found dead within 4 weeks of the last murder. His body was found floating in the Thames River on December 3rd, 1888.
Druit was found in the River Thames on the 31st of December, 1888, not the 3rd of December, more like 8 weeks after the murder of Mary Kelly, not 4 weeks.
The second suspect was Michael Ostrog, a Russian doctor and a criminal. Ostrog had been in an asylum previously for homicidal tendencies. McNaughton notes that Ostrog couldn't provide a strong alibi for his whereabouts during the murders. Ultimately, he was not convicted because there wasn't enough evidence linking him to the crime.
Ostrog wasn't actually a doctor. He was a con man who pretended to be a doctor. Ostrog wasn't cleared at the time. He was cleared recently by modern researchers when it was discovered that he was in a French prison while these murders were being committed, which tells you all you need to know about the competence of Scotland Yard in tracing suspects. As Ostrog was known to travel, one might think that checking with neighbouring countries was an obvious thing for the police to do. And as he was abroad, there can't have been any evidence upon which the police based their suspicion. I've done a film about Ostrog as well. Again, the link will be below.
The third suspect was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish and Jewish resident of Whitechapel who spent some time in an asylum in 1889 after the last murder. Kosminski would actually reside in asylums until his death in 1919. Kosminski was known for his hatred towards women, particularly prostitutes. According to McNaughton, his appearance matched descriptions provided by the police of a man in Mitre Square.
That is actually a fairly accurate account of Kosminski as per the McNaughton Memorandum, and they go on to fairly accurately debunk the Kosminski shawl DNA hoax, so they didn't do so bad on Kosminski.
The fourth suspect is the notion that Jack the Ripper was actually a female, a theory that Ripperologists call Jill the Ripper.
That they have Jill the Ripper as their fourth most likely suspect worth discussing tells its own story. I get, that it's all for entertainment, not for a serious discussion. I'm not going to waste words on Jill the Ripper.
The fifth suspect is Prince Albert Victor Christian Edward, aka the Royal Conspiracy.
You know how they say you never trust someone with 2 first names? This guy's got 4 of them.
This theory is often scoffed at, but is still perpetuated due to its wild popularity. Prince Edward was known to frequent areas where the victims were found, an activity that led to him contracting syphilis, which some believe drove him to insanity. Some posit this also resulted in Albert having a child with a local woman, and Queen Victoria demanded that everyone who knew of the child to be taken care of. Some believe that the insanity spawned by syphilis drove him to commit the murders himself.
One reason this theory is scoffed at is because royal court records prove that Prince Eddie was out of London when each of these murders took place. He most certainly wasn't known to frequent areas where the victims were found, in the East End, and the suggestion that he had syphilis is a theory that isn't backed up with any evidence. And the whole suggestion that he had a child which influenced these murders was debunked many years ago as well.
The sixth suspect is famed painter Walter Sickert, a theory mainly posed by the successful crime novelist Patricia Cornwell.
They go through quite a few aspects of the case presented for Walter Sickert being Jack the Ripper.
Aside from stunts, Cornwell rightfully claims that Sickert was obsessed with the Ripper, which was true. Sickert referenced the Ripper in some of his paintings, even titling one, quote, Jack the Ripper's bedroom.
He definitely seems to have been obsessed with the macabre, and in particular the Jack the Ripper case.
Cornwell also shoots down the notion that Sickert's alibi was that he was in France at the onset of the murders. She cites sketches that place him in London in music halls at the time of at least 3 killings.
Sickert seems to have been in France on holiday during September 1888, which puts him out of the picture for most of the murders, and he would have had to interrupt his holiday and quickly commute back and forth to London if he did indeed carry out these crimes.
However, the biggest piece of her case is the analysis of forensic paper expert Peter Bauer. Bauer identified 3 of Sickert's letters and 2 of the Ripper's letters as coming from a handmade paper run of only 24 possible sheets.
Most of the Jack the Ripper letters are regarded as blatant forgeries and copycats of the original few, which were reproduced as facsimiles by the police and given widespread publicity. The ones that Patricia Cornwell claims are written on similar paper, and even that claim is disputed. The similar paper to that used by Sickert are obscure letters, including the Openshaw letter, which I covered in this film, be a link below. Openshaw letter regarded as a blatant forgery. Or should I say hoax. So all this might prove at best is that Sickert may have written a couple of hoax letters, which given his Ripper obsession is not exactly unlikely. The point is actually well made in this film.
It should be reminded that all of the Jack the Ripper letters are unconfirmed.
I think he probably didn't do it, but he is indeed a weirdo.
The 7th suspect is Joseph Barnett, who is particularly suspicious as he actually lived with Mary Kelly, the final Ripper victim. According to an issue of the Daily Telegraph on November 10, 1888, Barnett referred to Mary Kelly as, quote, his wife, end quote, when she was in fact only a roommate. As a fish porter, Barnett would have crude anatomical knowledge.
They posit that he had anatomical knowledge because he was a fish porter?
He called Mary Kelly his wife as they lived together as husband and wife, what is known as sort of common law, but they weren't actually married, so he wasn't only a roommate. Being a fish porter didn't give Barnett crude anatomical knowledge, even of fish. And if you did have anatomical knowledge of fish, I don't really think that would prove very useful in attacking humans with a knife. Fish porters, by the way, carried boxes of fish around. The fish business at Billingsgate Market, the main fish market that used to be in central London in the city, which is where he worked, the jobs, the different trades there were very strictly demarcated, and porters were only allowed to carry fish. They weren't allowed to fillet them and cut them up.
I like it.
Pretty good, right? I mean, also to me, most of them, frankly, are very circumstantial. This one, to me, while also circumstantial,
seems the closest to actual evidence in that he lived with her. They fought 10 days before her death. He was not a fan of prostitution.
Right.
He tried to keep her off the streets. I could totally see him killing people to try and scare her from doing that, right?
The motive here is certainly the most compelling.
For sure.
Out of all the suspects.
And even the access is the most compelling. We have a known, this is the only one where I feel like there was a very clear tie between the possible killer and the victim.
So they actually like Barnett as a suspect, at least for the Mary Kelly murder it seems, but they don't seem to know that he was cleared by the police at the time as he had an alibi.
The 8th and final suspect is the most popular suspect on casebook.org. The final suspect is James Maybrick. Maybrick's death coincided with the stopping of the Ripper killings, as he died 1 year after the murders. Maybrick was an upper-class cotton merchant who resided in an estate called the Battle Crease House in Liverpool. Some would consider this to be a damning detail, as many feel the Ripper was a local man who likely wasn't upper class. However, it should be pointed out that all the murders were committed on a weekend. It stands to reason that a wealthy cotton merchant would have the ability to travel on weekends.
Then we come to their last suspect, James Maybrick, who they describe as the most popular suspect on casebook.org, a largely defunct Jack the Ripper discussion board. I would guess that it's been 20 years since Maybrick topped any poll to be the most likely suspect. All the murders were not carried out on weekends. Polly Nichols was killed in the early hours of Friday morning. Then they go on to discuss the diary.
That piece of evidence is a diary reportedly discovered under the floorboards of Maybrick's estate. A diary that is signed, quote, "I give my name that all know of me, so history do tell, what love can do to a gentleman born. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper."
They give a pretty fair account of the diary, including the confession that it was fabricated.
I don't know, I like the other guy better.
Barnett?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might too. From like just looking at circumstance, it seems like he'd be the most likely.
The case for Maybrick being Jack the Ripper is purely dependent upon the diary, and virtually everyone now accepts that it was a forgery, and these two fellows preferred Barnett. Although,
I know you don't like to hear this. This is sort of like my approach to a lot of these real old true crime ones.
Yeah.
It's sort of the JFK
Oh no,
approach.
I know what you're going to here. No, please don't say it.
Let it be a mystery.
Oh my.
You know, we'll never know.
Yeah.
their final conclusion is that it will remain a mystery. So they're in agreement probably with the majority of people who take an interest in this field. They came up with a bit of a disappointing suspect list, I think, not least because Lechmere didn't make it, and there's no real analysis of the downside of any of these suspects, and they relied upon a cast of largely discredited stock old school suspects. I must admit that this film has been an easy target, low-hanging fruit if you like. It isn't difficult to pick holes in it. I've been accused of bullying in the past, believe it or not, or being mean when I've critiqued other theories. But in the world of historical discourse, criticising other ideas is standard behaviour. But in this instance, I'm a bit of a YouTube minnow, so I'm punching up against a hugely bigger channel, not punching down. Okay, I get it, this film is largely for entertainment purposes, but it's aimed at a younger audience, and this is how they obtain their information. And what we will see is a new tranche of people coming into the field with inaccurate preconceptions shaped by this sort of film. But what do you think? Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, share, like, and comment below.
Darkness won't be late. Lechmere shadow cold as stone, but his name cuts through the bone.